SFA brings together a strong community to foster collaboration, innovation, and partnerships among members. As the elected president since March 2021, Mr. Shadab Tayabi leads the SFA Executive Committee, which sets the strategic direction for its activities related to representation, advocacy, fostering business growth, facilitating access to capital and opportunities. So let's put our hands together to welcome Mr. Tayabi to the stage, please. And on the panel, we have Kelvin Kong, the Executive Director at Mentoring SG. Kelvin is deeply passionate about organization transformation and development. He loves helping leaders build a high-performing culture centered around creating customer value. As a change catalyst, his mission involves two things: building organization cultures, building national support ecosystems. As a business leader, Kelvin has helped many organizations establish, prioritize business drivers, and build a high-performing, data-driven, and motivated teams to achieve great results. He is a strong facilitator and be facilitating for strategic generation, senior leadership conversations, leadership development, sales and commercial training, and coaching and various soft skills. He has served across the world from US, Latin America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, including China, and all over the globe. Kelvin holds an MBA from the University of Hull, UK, specializing in management and leadership. Let's put our hands together to welcome Kelvin up on stage. We also have Neem Siva Kumaran, Head of Strategic Partnerships Arc Spaces, which is a leading flexible workspace provider spanning across Singapore, Malaysia, and China. Neem is a strong advocate of building inclusive and community-driven workspaces. He's contributed to thought leadership pieces around the world like Future of Work, likes of Thrive Global, and Forbes Ignite. He's a well-known personality within the VC community and startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia, as a connector, mentor, and community builder with likes of Meet Ventures, Startup Grind University, the Global Startup Awards, Web 3.0, Supper Club, just to name a few. Let's welcome Neem to the stage, please. Lastly, we have a familiar face, Sri Morgan, with AgPack Publishing HR business partner Riot Games. More than 15 years of experience in banking, fintech, and high-tech sector, spanning across MNCs and startups, specializing in human development in areas as HR, business partnering, talent acquisition, learning and development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and IT. She was involved in Unleash program 2018 held in Singapore, which is a global innovation lab which gathers more than 1,000 talent annually to collaborate on solutions to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Let's welcome Sri to the stage. All right, shut up. I'll let you take away the panel now.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see a few familiar faces here as well. I can see Hoklai is here, ex-president of SFA. It's a pleasure to be, sitting in the august company of so many professionals who are helping develop the future workforce of Singapore. I am actually honored, given that I'll be very honest, this is one of the first types of, forums that I'm doing, which are focused specifically on workforce. Essentially, it's very close to my heart as well. So just to give you a bit of a perspective, SFA, we are the National Industry Association representing the whole fintech ecosystem in Singapore. We have about 10,000 plus professionals who are employed by the fintech industry across multiple segments. We are the main trade association, which is representing the companies, but we also have an individual community that we created 2 years ago, which is focused on building the fresh graduates and the experienced professionals in the fintech ecosystem. So very interested to hear your thoughts and to understand your perspectives on how you see the future workforce evolving, what are the trends that are being seen, and of course, the impact of technology on all of that. So I think the MC gave us a bit of an introduction, but it would be good to hear from each one of you. What are some of your major learnings in the past 2-3 years specifically? And I'm talking about the past 2-3 years specifically. Just to start with that, with your intro weaved in together. So maybe we start with Sri. Yeah.
Hey everyone, and want to thank Hashtags and Renee again for inviting all of us to be part of this exciting panel. So if I wanted to reflect back past 2 to 3 years in regards to what I've learned, I think COVID has been a great experience. And I mean it in quote unquote, because while it was challenging for all of us, I think from a workforce perspective, there's a lot of things that we learned, right? And I'm talking about HR or people department, as we'd call it. We were not just part of the table, but we were the table itself at some point, right? We had to be the messenger of communications, hybrid work relations, policy change. There were so many things that I think that is accelerated because of what we went through in COVID. And I personally feel that there's a few themes that I will like to touch on later on agility coming from both employees and employers, but also talking about, humanizing the workforce. I think that's a really important topic for us to consider, given that mental health and there's so many other issues that once were thought to be, taboo to discuss in the organization has come to the forefront that we need to address for our workforce, which is multi-generational. So I think that would sum up sort of my learnings for the past 2 to 3 years.
Thank you, Shri. Nim, please.
So first of all, I wanted to thank Renee. I don't think she's here, for inviting me. So I think over the last 3 years, finally we can meet in person. So I think COVID was able to do what the CIO wasn't in terms of digital disruption. But so I guess in terms of my day-to-day, I'm from Arc Spaces. We're a flexible workspace provider. So we work with startups, SMEs, and also multinationals. So really, I think what people are gravitating towards is human connection in the workplace and a sense of purpose and belonging, whether that's through community engagement or whether that's, being around people that, share the same type of energy that you or, people that you can sort of learn from as well. Yeah.
Thanks. Kelvin, you come in at in a very different position as well, right? In terms of, looking at the national impact of how the future workforce development will be impacted. So just want to hear your thoughts and views as well, with an introduction, of course.
Right. Thank you. Just a quick thanks to the organizers. I think every one of you has been working very hard behind the scenes. Thank you for the audience as well. We have a sparse, small, cozy group of people here. I encourage you to just pick up the mic and join us in that conversation. That would be great. Just by means of introduction, I wear the hat of the Executive Director for Mentoring SG for this panel. Professionally, I also look after HR across various companies. I came from Alibaba, Unilever, Apple. So I'm coming from both lenses. A little bit on the corporate side, actually, I love to share with, learn from Sri and have a good discussion. But Mentoring SG really comes from a national perspective, not just because of COVID, even way before that. We recognize that our young talents, our young people, are going through a different set of stresses and pressures as compared to people like my time, right? So it's a multifaceted need that they faced. However, the system or the ecosystem of support, the organization, many of them are NGOs, are designed very much to support one aspect. They are funded, they are KPI'd in that particular manner. So very often what we found is that when the young people step forward to get support in any form, usually the need is not completely met. And there's often a gap there. And we also know that the young people may not want to, may not be motivated to, or know how to step forward to get the support because maybe they don't know what they don't know. So Mentoring SG is established, a partnership between big corporate giants as well as the government, schools, and people sectors just to address this issue. So over time, we have been working on a national level, but we realized that our young people spend 40 to 50% of their time at work in schools. So now this year, we are moving more into our partner organizations to start to work with them. So that's where I'm coming from.
Great, thanks, Kelvin. I think that's an amazing step forward, to support the corporates, the companies, as well as the businesses overall. So Shri, I'll jump to you directly. In your 14 years in the talent acquisition space, how have you seen it evolve, and also share some lessons with us in terms of how to ride the waves?
Really dates me, the 14, 15 years, but I think how I've seen it evolve, I think I'll go back to the time, which feels like a very long time ago, when I was applying for jobs, right? Where we have systems for the sake of it, where they ask you a bunch of questions, you enter it, and then everything else is face-to-face interviews. And I think now that has changed so much through to technology once again, right? You get so much of information about a candidate before you even meet them. You get to know about there's the LinkedIn profile, there's all the social medias that they are available on, there's psychometric assessments, there's just so many bunch of information that is available, not just to talent acquisition, but the hiring manager for them to make a decision. So that has definitely changed. I think just the way even questions are asked in interview has changed, right? I remember, I will not go into details. I remember there was a local company that I interviewed for. One of the questions was, so are you intending to get married? When are you, intending to get pregnant? I was like, at that point, I was like, I didn't know what to say, but I was like, sorry? So I didn't know how to answer. And I was like, at that point, I wasn't even in HR. I was actually in tech. So I was like thinking, is this even a relevant question you should be asking someone? I was, 26 then? I was like, I don't know. So again, that has changed a lot. I think now employers are given so much of tools as to how they can better approach candidates, how they can better connect with the candidates. And from the employee perspective, I think things have changed as it's no longer just a means to an end. It's no longer work-life balance, it's work-life integration. People come to work to be their full selves, right? So nowadays, you get questions from employees to employers around, so what is your policy around supporting single moms? That could even be more touchier topics such as, okay, what's your policy around LGBTQ? And you as an employer need to be prepared to answer some of the questions. I know, again, with different generations in the workforce, people might be surprised that some of these questions are coming up. But I think it's about enabling our employers, our managers to be able to handle some of these questions and seek support and training in wherever form they can to be able to answer that. We have heard a lot of buzzwords as well, like great resignation, quiet quitting. To me, I think this has always existed in different stages and different forms. But these are, again, key trends and buzzwords that keep coming up. I wanted to go back to humanizing the workforce. I think HR is also moving to human development as a key area, which the previous panel spoke about sustainability ethics. That also falls under sort of the people department. And that is something organizations need to think about as they step forward into the future, right? I could also say that, for example, mental health. And I know, again, another topic that a lot of employers, it's a taboo topic almost. I think at least in ASEAN or in Asia, when you talk about mental health, people almost say, okay, if they know I have a problem, HR is going to run straight to my business and they're going to tell them, and I'm going to be out of a job, which is not necessarily the case, right? So it's about how do you handle all of these conversations, bring an experience to an employee, which is not just about the salary, but it goes above and beyond. And I think last but not least, Singapore government have been talking about upskilling and reskilling for several years now. For myself, I was a IT personnel, so I was doing information security for a while, and then I jumped on to HR. And I think a lot of this reskilling and upskilling and a growth mindset helped me to make the move, and also requires companies to focus on, okay, how can we train this individual to move into the role?
Thank you, Shri. Some very pertinent points there, especially on mental health and how the whole talent acquisition preparation for the managers has changed a lot, right? I'm sure some of our senior colleagues or maybe our own parents' generation, they will be surprised to look at the questions are being asked, right? But it's always good. I think it's a development. It's forward-looking. It's the way of engaging with the next generation workforce. Now, we've talked about the talent acquisition. We've talked about how the evolution of this whole entry point is changing. I'd like to ask Nim about, since you operate communities at a different level altogether, how do you see that has evolved, and what are some of the trends that you're seeing there?
Yeah, I think just to touch on Shree's point, so when you look at well-being, I think it's important to take a holistic approach to well-being. So that could be not just mental and physical health, but that could be social well-being, financial well-being. What else have we got? We've got career well-being. So there's a number of different pillars. I think when you look at well-being, it's important to look at it in its entirety versus piecemeal. I guess when it comes to community, you can't. Number one is like you can't fake community. And there's a old saying by Dale Carnegie, And it's to be interesting, you have to be interested. So people talk about curiosity, or people may talk about global mindset. But I think ultimately it comes down to, when people have traveled, lived, perhaps worked overseas, and you bring like-minded people together, you can have that sense of purpose, sense of belonging beyond, as you were saying, Sri, beyond just a paycheck. It's like, why do you do what you do? And sometimes you do get that in your workplace. Sometimes you have to go outside to get that, engagement. So I'm a big believer on managing energy over time. So from a community perspective, it's just really about finding your tribe. And from a workplace, maybe Kelvin can add, with everyone, I guess people working remotely now, previously you would have access to mentors in the workplace. And now because we're all dispersed, how does that, I think things are maybe a bit evening up now, but I think, if you go back maybe a year ago, I think it was quite difficult to gain that support.
Yeah, thanks, Nim. Am I supposed to respond to that?
Thanks, Nim. I like how you're doing my job. I appreciate that.
I switched in.
I like that segue. Very nice, very nicely. I think just to address that point and on mentors in the workplace, I think it's a much bigger topic. Today, access to mentors can come in many forms. Most importantly is for the mentee, what is the best way for them to get support? That is the biggest question, which is why we redefine the word mentoring. We make it so vague, right? A coffee with someone is mentoring. A huddle with a group of people with a common interest is mentoring. A formal mentoring program with an outcome in mind is mentoring. So don't ask me the difference between coaching and mentoring. I'm very blurred myself, but the question is we need to broaden the perspective, be more inclusive so that more people have an opportunity to even get started. So I think with that, people are coming back to the workplace, but even during the 3 years of COVID, people found their own way if the organization creates the infrastructure for them to do that. I think that's the key point here.
No, thanks for that. You want to add some aspects about the trends in the overall growth of the workspace that you're seeing?
I think both Sri and Nim talk a lot about development, but I just share one. I wear the hat of a business leader now. Today, with the pressures I'm facing from my board, from my investors, actually the thing I think about is not so much that. There's only one bullet point that thinks about people right now, if you think about it, right? I'm thinking about things like how do I consolidate my business? How do I optimize my business? How do I have efficiency? How do I do more with less? How do I automate? I'll be thinking about things like how do I see data analytics? Everything is about justification. Whether to my customers, my shareholders, my bosses, my board, very much that is the very real pressures that business leaders are facing. So sometimes when I talk to them about people, the only thing they will think about is, what if we lose our top talents? Right? How do I keep the morale of the people high? Why do you want to keep the morale of people high? Because they are the one that deliver the results. Yeah. So then it's no longer so much humanization. It's all about KPIs and results, which is business. We understand that. I think that is what I wanted to add because as we discuss, we need to understand reality. The business leaders are pressured this way. So maybe as we discuss, we can talk about how then organizations can prepare the future workforce in such scenarios.
No, that's very apt, Kelvin. I think this brings me the question to Sri. How do you think tech is enabling that performance output maximization? How do you think technology can sort of support not just the talent acquisition, but also once they are in, how do you use technology by the enable use of technology by the managers to sort of maximize the output? So one of the things that he mentioned about the key man risk and the challenges of keeping the hypo within the organization. So just want to hear some of your thoughts, Sri.
I think tech has enabled us. I think the biggest thing is really the systems, right? And the data, to Kevin's point about there's a lot of data that's required. They want to know, for example, utilization of talent in the organization. They want to know employee engagement. Yes, another key factor into performance. And some of them, in the past, it used to be a yearly survey. Now it's monthly, weekly, right? People want to know how people are feeling, to Kevin's point, not just for high potentials, but for rest of the people in the organization, how are they feeling? How are they contributing to the performance? So what has tech enabled us is from a data point of view. In the past, there were tons and tons of Excel spreadsheets. Everyone would be scrambling to put in the data, collate the data. Now a lot of that woodwork is taken out of the process, and it's more about using your brain power to synthesize and look at themes that's coming up. So that's definitely an enablement of tech from a productivity perspective. I'm also thinking that, for example, and all of you have heard about ChatGPT for sure, right? And that's something that we keep asking, for example, are we allowed to use ChatGPT? I had actually someone come up to me and ask me that question, and I'm like, how you utilize a tool as such is really up to you, right? It's not a means to an end, meaning my opinion is that the information that you gather from bots like this is really helping you to set frameworks and getting started. But ultimately, people are still required to drive some of these insights and whatever these tools are giving you, right? A great example is one of my friends actually mentioned that he was kind of scratching his head on thinking about DEI initiatives, right? And he was like having a very tiring day. He decided to go to ChatGPT and ask some answers from ChatGPT. And yes, he did get a list of items, but he didn't just take it as verbatim, right? We then put in our inputs. And so I think from a tech perspective, AI, for example, is just enabling us to spend our time on gathering insights rather than data, which is a very long, tedious process. And I do see that from a training and development perspective, I think companies need to focus on critical thinking, sort of providing the avenues for people to, it still goes back to what we call soft skills, but it's also around presentation, right? It's about how do we gather all of this data, make sense of the insights, and let our employees learn from that, give them the space to learn and grow.
No, those are some very fine points you mentioned. And of course, any discussion without the discussion on generative AI is almost impossible in the past few months, since November last year, just to be specific. I'll go into a bit more of that in a while, but I just want to use that, that pivot to ask Nim about, what we are hearing, generally now is that the style of the millennial generation is very different from what it used to be for the seniors, right? How do you see, the workforce, especially in your communities, evolving or the workforce infrastructure evolving in your communities to support that? And is it true? Is it really true?
I'm Gen X, so I'm too old to be millennial. So I think now we've actually got Gen Z in the workplace. So I think everyone has a different way of working. So people have, for example, if you look at TikTok, Gen Z use TikTok as a search engine. They don't actually go to Google and say, so, and coming on to, so it's like, how do I ... But the same way somebody would use Google, people are now using ChatGPT. And it's really for the interest of time. Yes, we may be a bit more lazier, but I see this as more of a co-learning, co-working pilot type of thing. So it's interesting. I think with in terms of diversity beyond, people of different nationalities and male and female, I think diversity is also about neurological diversity. People think in different ways, and that's. It might be millennials, it might be Gen X, it might be, what's the new one coming in? Alpha, is it? I think...
Still not, yeah.
I think...
Not aware of those lexicons.
It's coming. And of course, there's new industries popping up. So a lot of talk about Web3 or AI, for example. So, Web3, in a sense, that industry is still evolving. So we don't really know what it's going to be. But you have more insight, but perhaps within the next 5 to 10 years. So the future of work is evolving with industries as well.
So understood. I think it makes sense for for workforce communities and all to be sort of cognizant of these changes happening, the preference, the lifestyle changes that are happening as well within the future workforce. But more importantly, I think touching on the technology aspect as well, I'd like to hear Kelvin's thoughts. How do you think that the whole mentor-mentee relationship will evolve? I know this is a question that I'm just throwing at you, but I think it's important for us to understand that so far, the mentoring concept has been pretty much on equal sharing between mentors and mentees. I have been a mentor and I've been a mentee before, but I have learned more as a mentor than a mentee, just to be very honest, because that actually puts me into the latest trends and latest changes that are happening, and to see from a new joiner's perspective or relatively junior person's perspective of how they are seeing the challenging work environment and so on. So just want to understand, with the advent of this, for example, generative AI, or future technologies that are coming in, where do you see that kind of a shift happening in the whole mentoring ecosystem?
Thanks for bringing up the topic of mentoring. Why I'm so passionate about this, and why many of us are very passionate, I'm sure we all believe that mentoring is impactful. Now, how do we apply that to work in the workplaces, right? You see, the gist of a lot of things we talked about is about the fact that the business landscape is changing, expectations are changing, business processes are changing. So basically, everyone is a new joiner every day. I might have this KPI 3 months ago. In 3 months, I've got a new set of directions, right? So basically, we have new people in our organization. Isn't that stressful for HR? Isn't that stressful for your business leaders? You are literally hiring non-stop in a sense. So imagine having someone. Now, whether we talk about mental wellness, for example, in Singapore, among the young people, 18 to 20% of them show a sign of some kind of mental wellness, or should I say, depression signs. Not that they have depression, but there's some signs to it, right? Mentoring is not looking at fixing that, but rather we have the 80% of them that we have not really done much, and we want to stop them from moving down that direction. So whether it's in the mental wellness space, whether it's about learning new skills, about being ready mentally for the new job, imagine having someone who has taken 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, guiding you. Let's look at it from the employee life cycle. From employee attraction. Most of the time, if you go to career road fair, no matter how you promote it, they will still be in the state of, I'm not sure, right? Imagine having a network of mentors from your organizations walking around, sharing about the industry, sharing about the company, your ambassadors. New joiners, you talked about it, right? You have been a mentor, a buddy. Okay, the toughest thing about any new joiner is to understand the business, yes, we know, the culture, and to have the right networks to know how to self-help and know who to look for. A mentor can solve that very easily for them. Now you talk about people, you talk about mentoring not just for an exclusive group of people, but mentoring for everyone. Imagine always having a group of mentors who are always willing to listen, to spend time with anyone, to share about what they do, but also to listen, but also to give feedback to the management about the voices of the people. Today, getting such data is hard through surveys, but the authentic conversation, if it can happen every moment, every day of the time, your mentors becomes a very powerful network for insights generation of how people feel, and more importantly, how should you prioritize your HR work streams and priorities. So I think that's where I believe that if we could discuss with organization, whether you are here or even if it's through the recording, we really want to start having that conversation. Anyway, you're the one who will be doing the work, not us, right? But just to trigger that and to share best practices among the different corporates that we work with, I think that's the starting point of what we want to do.
No, thanks, Kelvin. I think these are very important, pertinent questions that we probably need to be aware of and sort of, use this channel as developing the workforce of future, right? Which brings me, of course, to something which is relatively closer to my heart, which is fintech, finance and technology combined. So we all know how technology has been, sort of impacting the work style and the workforce preferences. Just want to hear, one statement or 2 statements from each of you in the interest of time. Where do you see technology supporting your core and your core business, and also in terms of your own core proficiency that you bring on the table? Where do you see that evolving with the use of technology going forward? Sure, please.
I can go. So I can maybe take it from the lens as a flexible workspace operator or provider. So one of the things we've noticed is that, the workplace is changing and the definition of office or work is changing. So people are coming to collaborate. They're coming to, dare I say, socialize as well. And some of our best work doesn't necessarily need to take place in the confines of 4 walls. It can take place basically anywhere. But it really depends on the nature of your job. So I think with technologies such as AI, will that allow us to be more human? So when you're, let's say in the office, it allows you to be more present, less distractions, focus on engagement with your colleagues, or that could be with clients. I do see it. I know there's talk about like a Skynet coming. But I see sort of the flip side to that in terms of, it's important for companies to align with their purpose. And I think, get people on board with that. And you'll find that, eventually it will, people will focus on being more human, I would say.
Okay. I've just been told that 10 minutes have been shortened to 3 minutes. So let's just do one quick phrase from both of you, Shri and Kelvin.
So I think to summarize it really quickly, tech is able to enable multi-generational people, I believe, in the workforce to support them. I think the key is how the methodology and delivery of this learning and giving them the space to enable them to learn tech, to help them, right? That would be my summary.
Very important. Thank you.
It's a short statement would be tech, if used in the right way that engages the next generation, can help us to connect and amplify the efforts, anything that we are doing.
Okay, so I think the messaging is very clear. Thank you for that. Tech is the enabler, but tech is also the enabler that scales across the broader development of the workforce. With that, we have enough time to ask questions on the floor.
We could. It's just that we have a 10-piece band that's bursting to put out some tunes. We want to make sure that the essence of the panel speakers are being conveyed to the audience here. So we're just trying to make it sure that you are not disturbed by the music. Yeah, we could do 1 or 2 questions, Q&A. Yep, shall we open up the floor? Can we have some mic runners? And Neem, you are a millennial, an elder millennial.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so we still fit into that category.
Let's just change the definition.
Hello, this is James Ong here. Yesterday we have quite a number of panel on the generative AI about the impact, right? So we have the mentor, we have the mentee, right? Of course, education is the biggest area of impact. So now, given the arrival of this technology, the ChatGPT, Midjourney, what should be the mindset shift in the mentor? Also, what is the mindset shift should be on the mentee as well, given the new landscape of the new technology, where I call it the Microsoft Office moment. Suddenly, we have a tool that is available to everybody, right? So I'd love to hear your point of view. Thank you.
James, I wasn't here yesterday, but your statement, if I just to understand, is there was a topic on ChatGPT and the mentor and the mentee. How should the mindset shift?
We talk about in general. I'm just saying,
Okay.
since it's a mentor-mentee session, right? I think what should the mentor upgrade themselves, right? It's because it's parallel. It's just the teacher also needs to change, the student needs to change, right? Of course, mentorship is slightly different from teacher only, right? So just curious, huh? Thank you. I love to hope to hear from you. Thank you.
I just say one thing, right? I think you just answered your own question. The mentor should then become the mentee as well. I think that's the first thing. Actually, nothing changed in my view. ChatGPT is just another new thing that arrives, right? But the mindset shift shouldn't have changed. The mentor should always be willing to learn. So I have a lot of mentors who are fresh grads right now, and I'm constantly learning new things from them. So not much of a change, but in any case, a mentor should always be humble to learn because, like you said, you gain more as a mentor than mentee, right?
I hope that answers your question, James, but you...
Excellent answer.
Yeah. I can agree more. I think, Kelvin, you mentioned about having mentors as a community that the workforce could readily tap in it for inspiration and for help and encouragement. And you spoke about justifications and what is very prevalent and very close to our hearts as we run our businesses or are part of workforce itself. So with that, let's give a round of applause to our panel speakers and our moderator.
Thank you.